I sat there, trying to keep my composure, but inside, I was seething. He walked into the conference room like he always did, straight-backed, head held high, the same smug look plastered across his face. Mr. K, the manager who told me I wasn't leadership material, the one who made sure I was overlooked for every promotion, every opportunity, no matter how hard I worked. And now, here he was, standing right in front of me, frozen in shock, because I was the one in the lead chair. I was the one holding the power now, his power. I could see it in his eyes the moment he realized everything he had ever told me was a lie, that I was more than capable, more than enough. And now, he was the one reporting to me. But here's the thing. This wasn't just about me getting the job. It was about everything he had taken from me, every moment he had tried to crush my confidence. And I wasn't going to let it slide. The question was, what would I do now that the tables had turned?
I never imagined I'd be sitting in this chair. Growing up, I was always the quiet one, the one who kept my head down and focused on getting the job done. I wasn't flashy. I didn't go out of my way to stand out. I just worked hard. I figured eventually someone would notice. But someone never did, at least not the way I expected. The people who got noticed were the ones who spoke up, the ones who pushed themselves forward, the ones who made sure their voices were heard. And there I was, quietly typing away, just trying to do a good job. When I first started at the company in San Francisco, it felt like the perfect place to finally prove myself. The tech world was booming, everyone was excited, and the opportunities were endless. I believed, naively, that if I worked hard enough, it would all pay off. That's when I met Mr. K. He was my manager, and at first he seemed like the perfect mentor. He knew his stuff, had a way with people, and seemed genuinely interested in my growth. For the first few months, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe he would be the one to see my potential. But as time passed, something shifted. At first it was small, just little comments here and there. You're doing good work, but leadership isn't for everyone. Or you don't have the confidence to lead a team. Little jabs that, at first, didn't sting too badly. But then it became the constant refrain. You're not leadership material, he'd say, almost like a mantra. Every time I asked for a promotion, every time I suggested an idea, there was always a reason why I wasn't ready. Maybe next year, he'd say, we'll see how you grow into it. And each time I swallowed my frustration, nodded, and went back to work. But deep down, I knew I could do it. I could lead. I could take charge. But somehow it felt like the world was conspiring against me, and Mr. K was the one holding me back. I had to prove him wrong. I had to prove everyone wrong. But how? How could I rise above the constant dismissal, the underestimation? I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't the type to give up. And then the opportunity came. A new company was acquiring a smaller competitor, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, this was my chance. But I had no idea just how big that chance would be, or how it would change everything.
When I first met Mr. K, I didn't see him as someone who would be a roadblock, at least not at first. In the beginning, he seemed like a seasoned leader, someone who could show me the ropes, someone who would help me grow into the kind of professional I wanted to become. I thought, this is my chance. The first few months were a blur of learning and small victories. Every day, I went home feeling like I was getting one step closer to the top. Mr. K would compliment me on my work every now and then, pointing out that I had potential, that I was on the right track. I felt validated, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. There was a time, just a few months into the job, when we worked late on a project that could have changed everything. The pressure was immense, but I was determined to make it work, so I stayed late every night, burned the midnight oil, and kept pushing to make sure we hit every deadline. Mr. K seemed impressed by my work ethic.
often pulling me aside to say how much he admired my dedication. For a brief moment, I thought maybe he was starting to see something in me. Maybe this was it, the moment I had been working for, the moment when I'd get the promotion I knew I deserved. But then something shifted. One day, I was sitting in a meeting, presenting my ideas for an upcoming project. I had done the research, created the strategy, and had everything laid out. But as soon as I finished speaking, Mr. K stepped in and completely overshadowed my ideas. He shot them down without even acknowledging the work I had put in. He didn't explain why, he just moved on to something else, making me feel like my thoughts didn't matter. At that moment, I felt small, silenced. It was as if everything I had worked so hard for had just been dismissed in front of everyone. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being undermined. After that, the pattern continued. Every suggestion I made, every opportunity I seized, seemed to be ignored or belittled. It wasn't just the work. I could feel the subtle shift in how Mr. K treated me. He started taking credit for things I had done. I remember one meeting when I had put together a presentation that was getting positive feedback, only for him to interrupt and say, "This is exactly what I've been pushing for. Great job." It was a slap in the face, but I didn't say anything. I didn't push back. I just kept my head down and did the work, knowing that one day I'd be able to show him and everyone else that I was more than what they thought. But by then, the damage had already been done. I was no longer that bright-eyed employee who trusted that hard work would eventually be recognized. I was someone who had learned the hard way that the world didn't always work the way you hoped. And somewhere along the way, I decided I wasn't going to wait for anyone to notice me anymore. I was going to make them notice. Have you ever had someone take credit for your work? What did you do? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your experiences. Things started to change slowly at first, like a low hum that you don't really notice until it's too late. I began to question everything. Was I just imagining things, or was Mr. K really as bad as I thought? The more I thought about it, the more the small, offhand remarks began to stand out. There was one day, about a year into working for him, when I asked for feedback on a project I'd completed. I was expecting something constructive, maybe a suggestion for improvement or a way to make it stronger. Instead, he looked at my work and just said, "It's fine, but don't expect any applause. This is the bare minimum." The bare minimum? It was like a punch to the gut. My heart dropped. I was putting in hours outside of work, staying late, doing everything right, and here he was, dismissing it like it was nothing. But I didn't fight back. Not yet. I just nodded and smiled, swallowing that frustration again. The thing is, I wasn't sure if Mr. K was just a tough manager or if he genuinely had something against me. The more I tried to prove myself, the more I felt like he'd find new ways to tear me down. The constant comparison to my colleagues was another clue I couldn't ignore. "Why can't you be more like Mark?" he'd say, referring to a peer who had no idea what it meant to hustle. Mark wasn't half as committed, but he always seemed to be getting the promotions, the credit. And still, Mr. K would praise him in front of me, telling me, "Mark has the leadership skills I'm looking for. You, on the other hand?" And that was it. The words hung in the air for a long time. You, on the other hand. I couldn't figure out if it was just his way of pushing me, trying to motivate me, or if he genuinely believed I was inferior. But something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep going like this. I started to pull away, feeling more and more like a puppet with invisible strings pulling me in every direction. I stopped asking for feedback. I stopped pushing for promotions. Every time I did, I ended up feeling like I wasn't enough, that somehow I wasn't worthy of the recognition I had worked so hard for. And as much as I hated admitting it, a part of me started to believe it too. Maybe Mr. K was right.
Maybe I wasn't cut out for leadership. But then something shifted again. The opportunity with the other company came up, and suddenly I had a choice: stay and keep fighting for scraps, or take a chance on myself. I chose the second option, but there was a small part of me that wondered if I was making the right choice. What if leaving meant I was giving up? What if it meant I wasn't strong enough to overcome Mr. K? I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear: I needed to escape this cycle, and I needed to do it on my own terms.
It was the kind of moment you never forget. The day I left Mr. K and the company was one of the hardest days of my life. But in a strange way, it also felt like a relief, a weight lifting from my shoulders. I remember the final conversation I had with him, where he pretended to be all supportive, offering me best of luck, like he actually cared. I didn't let myself feel bitter. Not then, not yet. I knew that leaving was the best choice. I took the new job with a competitor, a startup that saw my potential right away. They gave me a chance to lead a team, to show what I was really capable of, and I went in full force, determined to prove that I wasn't the failure Mr. K had always painted me to be. The first few months were a whirlwind. I was leading a small but talented team, setting goals, driving initiatives. I loved every minute of it, and I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined. I moved up quickly, gaining trust, earning respect. For the first time, I felt seen. But then came the bombshell, the acquisition. The larger company I'd joined was merging with a smaller one, and HR informed me I would be directly supervising a new employee. The name they gave me, Kyle Lawrence. I paused when I saw it. My heart skipped a beat. It was Mr. K. It didn't hit me right away. I thought maybe there was a mistake. I mean, how could he possibly be here? How could someone like him, who had barely managed his team, end up in a situation like this? And then it hit me. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. I had a chance to show him what it felt like to be ignored, to be underestimated. But this time, the tables were turned. I was in charge. I was the one who had power over him. The day he walked into the room, there was no dramatic entrance, no fanfare. Just the quiet sound of his footsteps as he entered and froze in the doorway. "Ella?" he said, his voice cracking, his face pale. It was the same guy who had belittled me for years, the same guy who had made me feel like I wasn't enough. But now? Now I was the one sitting at the head of the table. I was the one who had the power. For a moment, everything went silent. I could see the realization dawn on his face, the moment he understood that I wasn't just another team member anymore. I was the one who was in control. But the best part? I wasn't going to make this easy for him.
The silence in the room was thick. Mr. K didn't move. His eyes locked with mine, and for a split second, I saw something in them I hadn't expected. Fear. The confident, unshakable man who once held power over me was now standing there, uncertain, vulnerable. I could tell he didn't know what to do next. I could have said something. I could have given him a piece of my mind, told him everything I had been holding in for the past 2 years. But instead, I stayed silent. I didn't need to say anything. The power had shifted, and he knew it. I watched him shift uncomfortably, his hands slightly trembling as he adjusted his tie. He was trying to regain control, trying to make sense of the situation. But all I could feel was the rush of satisfaction that came with seeing him, the man who had crushed my confidence, now forced to submit to me. I focused on the meeting, on the task at hand. I wasn't going to let my emotions distract me. But inside, it was like a floodgate had opened. Everything I had buried, every insult, every slight, every moment of feeling small under his gaze, it was all coming to the surface. But I kept it together. I had to. I was in charge now. I had control. The rest of the meeting went by in a blur. Mr. K barely spoke, and when he did, it was stiff and forced. It was clear he was struggling to adapt to this new reality. He'd spent years putting me down, making me feel small, and now here he was, answering to me. It was a strange feeling. Part of me wanted to gloat, to make him feel as small as he had made me, but the other part of me just wanted to move on, to show that I was better than the petty games he had played with me. So I didn't engage with him. I didn't make a scene. I just did my job, and I did it well.
The days that followed felt strangely detached, like I was watching the whole situation unfold from a distance. I'd done it. I'd gotten my promotion. I'd turned the tables on Mr. K, but something inside me still felt unsettled. It wasn't enough to just be his boss now. No, I needed more. I needed him to feel what it was like, the way I had felt under his thumb for all those years. As much as I tried to ignore it, that simmering rage kept creeping up on me. He had humiliated me, ignored me, and treated me like I was invisible for years. It wasn't just about getting the job. It was about payback. I wasn't going to let him get away with all the things he'd said and done, not without him knowing the cost. But I didn't want to make a scene. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum or yell at him in front of the team. No, I was smarter than that. My revenge would be calculated, quiet, and, most importantly, effective. I started thinking about the small things, the moments when he'd undermined me, the way he'd taken credit for my ideas, how he'd positioned himself as the authority, even when he was wrong. Every slight, every look, every word, those would be the tools I'd use. I made a mental list of all the ways he had wronged me, the times he'd passed me over for promotions, the meetings where he'd belittled my contributions, the countless hours I had spent perfecting work that he would take credit for. I was going to use all of it to my advantage, not in a way that was obvious. No, I was going to make him feel like he had no choice but to submit. The first step was to take advantage of the position I now held. As his supervisor, I had the power to shape his career. If I wanted, I could make his days here miserable. But that wasn't my plan. No, I wanted to hit him where it hurt the most, his pride. I started assigning him projects that were critical to the company, but with no chance of success. He would have to report to me, and I would set him up in a way that made failure inevitable. He'd be too embarrassed to ask for help, too proud to admit when things weren't working, and when he fell short, it would all be his fault. The beauty of it was that I didn't have to lift a finger. I could watch him struggle, knowing that I was the one who had orchestrated it all. Slowly, I began to take control of his tasks, redirecting his focus to areas where he was weakest. I didn't give him room to succeed. Every move I made was carefully planned to break him down, piece by piece. And then there was the personal side. I began subtly pushing him into situations where he'd have to interact with colleagues who had no respect for him, people who had been on the receiving end of his arrogance, people who could remind him of the way he treated others and how it had cost him. In a strange way, I felt like I was both the architect of his downfall and the observer, watching as everything fell into place. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm, cool, in control. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a quiet satisfaction, knowing that I was shaping his demise. It felt good to be in control after so long of being at his mercy.
The day of the big presentation was here. It had been weeks in the making, and every detail had been set up to perfection. Mr. K had no idea what was coming. He was assigned to lead a critical project, a project that could make or break the company's merger with a rival firm. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing him exactly what it felt like to be out of control, just like I had been under his thumb all those years. I had already arranged for key players from the rival company to be at the meeting.
They knew Mr. K's reputation, and I made sure they were prepared to question him, to push him, to make him second-guess everything he presented. He didn't know that I'd also given them a bit of a nudge, some leading questions, some gentle suggestions to get him to trip up. As soon as the meeting began, I could see the tension in his shoulders. Mr. K was used to leading the charge, presenting with his usual smug confidence, but today he was different. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the way his voice trembled as he spoke. He wasn't in charge anymore, and the weight of that was suffocating him. His slides, carefully prepared, well-researched, were all over the place. He stumbled through each one, trying to regain his footing, but the questions from the rival company kept coming. But didn't the numbers suggest a different approach? How are we going to handle the risk factors you mentioned? And every time he answered, his responses grew weaker, more uncertain. It was like watching someone try to keep their head above water as the waves kept crashing down. I could feel the power shift with every passing moment. He was no longer the confident leader he once was. He was a man trapped by his own pride, his own insecurities. He was in over his head, and there was nothing he could do about it. I watched as his face turned red, his hands shaking as he tried to respond. The room grew quieter, and I could see the subtle glances exchanged between the other team members. They were noticing what I had known all along. Mr. K wasn't the leader he claimed to be, and now everyone else saw it too. It was painful to watch, honestly. Part of me felt a little bit of sympathy for him, but the other part of me felt nothing but satisfaction. This was what he had made me feel. Every moment he made me doubt myself, every time he undermined my confidence. This was the price he was paying now. By the time the meeting ended, I could barely hide the satisfaction in my smile. He had been brought to his knees, and I didn't need to say a word.
And the days that followed, the aftermath of that meeting was undeniable. Mr. K tried to save face, but I could see it in the way he avoided eye contact, the way his usual confident stride turned into a hesitant shuffle. He wasn't fooling anyone. The office gossip machine kicked into high gear. Whispers about the meeting spread like wildfire. People who had once been intimidated by him now looked at him with something else: pity. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. Even upper management began to question his leadership abilities. But I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The damage had been done. It wasn't the dramatic, explosive showdown I had imagined. There were no fiery confrontations, no shouting matches in the hallway. Instead, it was a slow, quiet unraveling. He wasn't fired. No, that would have been too easy. He was left to flounder, to try and rebuild his credibility with a team that no longer respected him, and that was far worse than any public humiliation. As for me, I kept my focus. The moment I'd been waiting for had passed, and I had gotten my closure. But more than that, I had proven to myself that I was capable of so much more than I had ever given myself credit for. The journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about finding my own strength, my own voice. I had taken back control of my life, of my career, and there was no turning back now. Still, there was a certain quiet satisfaction that came with watching Mr. K slowly fade into the background, while I stood firmly at the forefront. It was a reminder of how far I'd come, of how much I had achieved. I didn't need to say a word. His silence spoke louder than I could have ever said.
Looking back, I've realized something important. The revenge wasn't as sweet as I imagined it would be. At first, it felt like the ultimate victory, watching Mr. K crumble in the way he had once made me feel so small. But now, as I reflect on everything, I see that it wasn't really about him at all. It was about me. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above his toxic influence, that I could find my own strength, even when others tried to push me down. The real victory was never in seeing him fall. It was in learning to stand tall, regardless of the obstacles in my path. We often think revenge will make us feel better, that it will somehow right all the wrongs. But the truth is, it's rarely as satisfying as we expect.
The real power comes from letting go of the past, from not needing someone else's validation to prove our worth. It's about claiming our own space on our own terms. I don't need to keep replaying the past in my head, and I don't need to hold on to the anger anymore. The real growth comes from moving forward, taking control of the future rather than being trapped by the past.
This journey has shown me that no one can define your worth but you. If you've ever been underestimated or pushed aside, remember, your story isn't over. You have the power to change the narrative. So, if you want to keep learning, growing, and overcoming the obstacles life throws your way, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. I've got more stories to share, more lessons to teach, and more twists to reveal. Stay tuned for what's next, because the best is yet to come. And before you go, drop a comment and let me know, what's your next step in taking control of your own story? Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, remember, you are more than enough. Always.